Hey guys, in this video we'll go over what the chances of getting Jin, Bon, or Won crystals are. We're going to go over all the crystals like Magic Crystal Viper, Hystria, Harphia, Cobelinus, Carmae, and Addis. We're also going to go over the glorious crystals of honor and courage. The nice thing is that most of these crystals have the same rates, so we'll only need to go over 2 sets of rates. As you all know, making Magic Crystals Vipers, Kobes, etc., you can get either Jin, Won, or Bon variations of that crystals. Usually, Jin crystals are going to have superior stats, while Won and Bons are going to be a lot worse. This is reflected in the central market silver value, where there is a large difference in silver value between Jin, Won, and Bon of the same type of crystal. Now, in some cases, Bon or Won crystals can be used in niche scenarios, but in general, Jin is going to be the best. Now, because of this, when making these magic crystals, it's going to be very useful to know the rates of getting Jin versus Won versus Bon, as you would be able to predict the average silver you're getting or how long it'll take to get all the Jin crystals that you need. That brings us to the next part of the video where we're going to find the different rates of getting each crystal. Before this section, I'll just have to preface that a lot of these numbers are gotten from community scraping and not sanctioned officially by PA. A lot of my videos on RNG boxes or lightstones, those rates are posted on the official Black Desert Online website by PA, so it's highly likely that they're correct unless PA is trolling. Even though these numbers aren't technically official, they are really solid and most likely correct based on the experiences of the community as a whole. I just wanted to mention that they aren't guaranteed to be correct, as PA could always do some stealth updates to change the rates of Jin, Wons, and Bons, and since the numbers aren't official, they won't have to mention anything on the main website. However, these numbers are generally scraped from the code in the game and also backed up by community making multiple crystals, so they should be pretty solid. Now getting on to the rates, when you make any magic crystal or glorious crystal of courage that can get either Jin, Bons, or Wons, the crystals go through 2 checks. First, it checks whether or not it will be a Jin crystal. If this check fails, then it checks whether or not the crystal will be a Bon crystal. After that, if it fails both these checks, then the crystal will be guaranteed as a Won crystal. This is really important since the rates that the community has gotten is the rates of these checks. If we look on Videolytics or any of these data corrugation sites, you can see that for magic crystals, there's a 20% check to get Jin, a 30% check to get Bon, and a 100% check to get the Won crystal. For the Node War Glorious Crystals, there's a 10% check to get Jin, a 33% check to get Bon, and finally a 100% check to get Won. Now, what does this really mean? Does this mean that when you make a Magic Crystal Viper, that there's a 20% chance to get Jin, a 30% chance to get Bon, and a 100% chance to get Won? Well, of course not. That would give it a 150% chance in total, which doesn't really make sense in this context. To find the percent chance of getting Jin, Bon, or Won, we have to go through the checks that we mentioned earlier. Using the Magic Crystal Viper as an example for magic crystals, the first check is whether the crystal will be a Jin crystal at 20%. Because this is the first check, the overall average of getting a Jin crystal is going to be 20%. The second check of whether this crystal will be a Bon crystal, however, is 30%, but it requires the first 20% check to fail. Because of this, we need to get the chance of the first check failing, which is 1 minus 0.2 or 80%. We then multiply 80% by the 30% chance to get the chance of the crystal becoming a Bon after failing to become a Jin. This ends up with 24% or 0.24. That means that in total, there's a 24% chance of getting a Bon crystal whenever you make a Magic Crystal Viper. Finally, the remaining chance is 56%, as 1 minus 0.2 minus 0.24 is the remaining chance of getting a Won, which is 56%. So in total, you have a 20% chance of getting a Jin Magic Crystal Viper, a 24% chance of getting a Bon Magic Crystal Viper, and a 56% chance of getting a Won Magic Crystal Viper. This is the same for any of the magic crystals like Hystria, Harphia, Cobelinus, Carmae, and Addis. Now that we know that, let's look at the rates of the glorious crystals of honors and courages, as they have a different rate for the checks. Using the glorious crystals of honor max HP, we can see that the first check for Jin is 10%, so there's a 10% chance of getting a Jin. After that, there's a 33% chance to get a Bon, which if we use the same math we did earlier, 1 minus 0.1, which we get 90%. We then multiply it by 33.3 to get 29.97%. That means that there's a 29.97% chance to get a Bond crystal. Next up, we get the remainder, which is 60.03%, which is the chance of getting a Won crystal. In total, there's a 10% chance to get a Jin Glorious Crystal of Honor, a 29.97% chance of getting a Bond Glorious Crystal of Honor, and a 60.03% chance of getting the Won Glorious Crystal of Honor. This is the exact same for any of the Glorious Crystals of Courages. We just used the Glorious Crystal of Honor max HP as an example. So this is going to work for all blue and the orange crystals from Node Wars. Do keep in mind that the max HP used to be called Special Evasion before the Special Evasion changes. So now that we know all the rates of getting a Jin, Won, and Bon, what can we even do with this information? Well, since we know the explicit rates of getting either Jin, Won, and Bon, we can easily find out the value of making a crystal by multiplying the price of Jins by the rates of Jins, the price of Wons by the rates of Wons, and the price of Bons by the rates of Bons. We then add up all these together to get the average amount you get when you make one of these recipes. If the average amount you get is higher than the cost of making it, then it would be worth it to make them for yourselves. You can also use this method to find the price of unobtainable items like the Essences of Honor by subtracting out all the items that have a silver value and using the remaining silver to price the unobtainable items. We will go over valuing each recipe and item in another video, but this video will just be about the rates of Jin, Wons, and Bons. Anyways, again, these rates aren't completely guaranteed. If any of you have any updated information that goes against these rates, feel free to let me know. I'm always looking for more accurate and better data. To my knowledge though, these rates are as good as we have currently and are pretty decent based on my experiences. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all next time.